All right, welcome back, everyone. It's now time for our final panel of the day, Delivering Deals for Energy Security. This session highlights several U.S. Trade and Development Agency projects underway across the Indo-Pacific, examining how policy priorities are being translated into tangible investments across energy and critical energy infrastructure. And our moderator is Ms. Celeste Connors, President of the East-West Center. Ms. Connors is a recognized international leader with more than 25 years of risk management and national security experience. Established by Congress in 1960, the East-West Center is a national educational institution to foster better relations and understanding among the peoples of the United States, Asia, and the Pacific Islands through programs of cooperative study, training, and research. As a former direction of the National Security Council and the National Economic Council under both Republican and Democratic administrations, she chaired complex interagency processes and advised White House leaders on energy, trade, environment, and technology strategies. So Ms. Connors, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much. You know, this has been such an exciting day so far, so many conversations. I think we all should feel a lot smarter coming out of the afternoon. And this panel is really about delivering deals for the Indo-Pacific security. I think we have a great lineup here today, really diverse. We're going to cut across a lot of different types of energy technology. We have Tom Hardy, head of USTDA. We heard from Tom earlier today. Nguyen, the co-founder of Delta Offshore Energy. Yudistian, president director of PTGO Dipa Energy. And we have Matt Ganser, senior vice president of sales and government affairs at Lilac Solutions. We had an exciting conversation before getting up here. We're going to just really jump right in. But again, for context, and we heard from Tom earlier today, this is really about delivering the deals for Indo-Pacific security, focusing on how countries and companies across the region are translating policy goals into tangible action. I'm actually quite inspired to see the diversity of interagency partners here collaborating. We had some incredible panelists earlier to talk about that. These are about diverse perspectives, about critical minerals processing, large-scale power and infrastructure projects across Vietnam, looking at geothermal in Indonesia. And our region, the Indo-Pacific region, is entering into a moment where demand for power is rising. We have new drivers like AI and data center growth, and they're creating additional pressures on our already tight supply. We've heard a lot about the current supply chain disruptions, choke points. We don't have to, go over all of those, but it's really important that our systems are resilient and that we are actually achieving this regional energy security. So after a few brief introductions, we're going to hear how each panelist sees the energy future demand in their market, and we'll look at where they've had recent successes, as well as the frictions that are slowing progress. And then we'll turn to how our partners like USTDA can actually de-risk these projects and move them into bankability. So I'm sort of channeling Tom's earlier comment this morning. Our goal is simple. It's to leave this room with clear priorities and pathways for collaboration across this Indo-Pacific energy ecosystem. So I want to begin by inviting each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, their organization, their current priorities. Ian, we're going to start with you. So Vietnam is experiencing this fast rising power demand. LNG to power remains central to bridging that gap. So tell us about your company and how you've found partnerships in these public-private partnerships, both in Vietnam and in the US, to drive progress forward in the energy sector.
Firstly, I thank God, President Trump, USTDA, and especially Brent Harrison, who's been our key liaison there, our host, the Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry of Japan, as well as the National Energy Dominance Council and all the U.S. departments, including State, Interior, Commerce, as well as Energy. It's an honor to join Secretary Burgum and distinguished panelists focused on turning words into actionable deals. I think from our perspective, we'd like to use this opportunity to also thank the Vietnamese government. They also have a delegation here as well, led by Vice Minister of MOIT, Long, who I met when he was Director General of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and was a very early supporter of us. I think my co-founder, Bobby Quintos, and I, we really founded Delta Offshore Energy to respond to Vietnam's need for energy infrastructure and specifically private sector investments for their energy infrastructure need because of their tremendous growth trajectory. They're growing 7 to 8% GDP per year, and with electricity demand kind of at a 1.5 times multiple, you're looking at double-digit electricity growth. For a country that's 100 million people, that's quite sizable. And so that makes Vietnam actually the second largest electricity consumer in Southeast Asia, just behind Indonesia, where my fellow panelist is from. But unlike Indonesia, Vietnam does need to import quite a bit of their energy resources. I think overall, the bloc of nations in Southeast Asia is collectively a sizable buyer of imported energy because of the rapid growth through industrialization as well as their young demographic dividend. I think Vietnam alone represents up to 30 MTPA of LNG demand. That's based on 20 gigawatts of planned LNG to power and 10 gigawatts of gas-fired power plants in operation already. I would say under the new investor-friendly kind of policy of Vietnam's law on investment, we submitted our unsolicited proposal for LNG to power, which was the first one in the country. This was to replace a planned coal-fired power plant in the Mekong Delta that was proposed for cancellation by the local province. This was because the risk of the fly ash and bottom ash would affect the area, given the area was prone to flooding, as the Mekong Delta has a very low elevation. In particular, the key export industries in aquaculture and agriculture would be affected. Where we are, kind of the now Gamao province, there's a very big shrimp exporting industry there that's billions of dollars, so that would be at risk. So what we did was propose a project, and with the help of the province and the central government, they fast-tracked approval of our project, and so it allowed our project to be the first project approved in the National Master Power Plan. Following that, 20 gigawatts of other projects have now followed that exact blueprint. And this is under the IPP model. The project also includes about, in itself, is 3.2 gigawatts, but it also has its own associated gas and LNG infrastructure, which includes a LNG terminal, which has been dubbed the Trump Terminal of Vietnam, which is to receive, store, and regasify LNG. The U.S. government was very instrumental from the very beginning in helping us with this. We were part of the commercial advocacy program as early as our application for the master plan inclusion. And I think more recently, with the help of the National Energy Dominance Council, working with state and commerce in particular, we recently been able to get our principal grid connection agreement across the line just last week, which was signed and quite critical for us to move forward with our feasibility study approval and therefore negotiate our PPA. I would also say, what we're looking to do is, through our project, is it provides really a nice way to reinforce the comprehensive strategic partnership between both Vietnam and the U.S., and it also addresses at the same time Vietnam's national priorities of energy security as well as socioeconomic development. And in turn, obviously, the mutual interest in energy, trade, investment, technology is going to create a lot of American jobs as well. And ultimately, this virtuous economy, I think, will reinforce networks and multiplier effects that also has spillover benefits, not just for the U.S. and Vietnam, but also allies and partner countries, of which many are here today. I would once again like to thank both sides, and I'm excited to be on this panel.
Now we talked about this before, but a lot of need to work across different agencies. I think you mentioned that the coordination that you're seeing from our colleagues here has been really helpful for you. Also, the first out of the gate on the National Action Plan, it's really great to see that alignment with the focus on the national priorities. And it is interesting how you're balancing different energy mix and opportunities, what is actually driven by what the community is thinking that they need for them as well. So Yudis, why don't we move over to you? Geothermal and critical minerals are essential for Indonesia's energy transition and economic growth. Tell us about your work in Indonesia and the journey you've taken now to exploring critical minerals, including the partnerships that you've developed with U.S. private and public sector.
Yeah, thank you,
And I should
Celeste.
encourage you guys, if you want to jump in on each other's questions, you can do that as well. So.
Yeah, thank you, Celeste. It is really an honor to being here in the Indo-Pacific Energy Security Ministerial and Business Forums, and thanks to USTDA that inviting us to participate in this forum. We in the Dipa Energy, we actually as the state-owned enterprise, but Indonesia state-owned enterprise, we more on the renewable energy sectors developers, specifically in the geothermal development. Because we in Indonesia has the one of having the largest geothermal resource in the world, and then the geothermal right now has the key play role important in the transition energy in Indonesia. But what we doing right now, we try to expanding other than the energy that we also are looking. There is the opportunity that we could do in order to make the geothermal development is more attractive and that's really good for the project economic itself. Doing the geothermal operation in Indonesia, from time to time we got numbers of difficulties, especially facing the scaling issue in our geothermal operation. Then when we try to figure out what the scaling consists, then we figure out that there is numbers of minerals in it. Then we willing try to focus on that minerals. So the journey we started in 2020. At the time we exploring the concept how we could extract the mineral that the following with our operation from day-to-day basis, but that also giving us the problem. So then how we could address that kind of problem, and now we try to converting the problem into the opportunity. So since then, we conduct numbers of initial technical and commercial assessment, how to extract the minerals, and understand how the feasibility and the potential business model for this opportunity. Today, we are entering to the next phase. We are preparing to conduct the pilot plan tests, actually, and feasibility study, especially for mineral extractions. One of the really exciting minerals what we got is considering categorized as the critical mineral or rare earth minerals that we call it the lithium. And then by having numbers of discussion, communication, others, and then we find the Lilac as one of the technology providers for extracting mineral from the brines. So by sponsors by USTDA, the partnership between Dipa and U.S. technology providers and also U.S. the government support us, and the important step right now evaluating whether our geothermal brine in Indonesia can become a sustainable source of critical mineral waters. For us, this is initiative reflected a broader vision. Geothermal is not only producing the clean energy, but it can also contributing the building the more integrated clean energy and the critical mineral ecosystem as well. And we believe that a strong international partnerships such as those between Indonesia and the United States will be key to turning to this opportunity into reality. This is for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Yudis. And we were talking earlier about just how to move these things faster, right? From study to review to exploitation. all in one phase, and the importance of new and innovative technology and really scaling up. Matt, I think that turns directly over to what Lilac is doing, both in the near term with lithium production in the U.S., but also as a global technology provider. You just alluded to that. Can you also describe your technology and some of the challenges in bringing about innovative and new technologies into a historically conservative space?
Sure, and we're really excited to be here and really appreciative of USTDA. I know I called you guys hundreds of times in order to help make this deal happen, so thank you very much. So Lilac in brief, we're a US-based lithium technology and soon-to-be lithium production company. We started about a decade ago working mostly in South America and really pulled by the market. We're now in North America, Europe, the Middle East, and now Asia-Pacific, and working in Indonesia, which we're very excited by. We're also building our first commercial facility in Utah. It's going to be a 20,000 ton per year lithium carbonate facility with the first 5,000 tons that hopefully we reach FID on in the next 4 to 8 weeks. As far as our technology goes, so we're a lithium technology company. We make it possible to profitably extract lithium from brines. All right, so what are brines? Brines are really salty water that you can find everywhere. They're ubiquitous. If you drill down beneath our feet here, we will definitely find brine. Those brines could be aquifers, they could be old oil and gas reservoirs, produced water, geothermal, or aqueous recycling streams, such as you can find in Europe or Japan. Now, why does that matter? So if you take a step back, the global demand for lithium about a decade ago was about 150,000 tons per year. Right now, it's 1.5 million tons. It's grown at a compound annual growth rate in the high teens. That's going to continue in the teens to 3 to 4, 5 million tons the next 5 to 10 years. And there's an open question of where is that lithium going to come from? And it's not entirely clear. And our thesis at Lilac is that brine and technology is the answer. Why that? Brine is everywhere, it's ubiquitous, it's on a global basis. There's far more lithium in brine than certainly in hard rock. And then on the technology side, our technology is capable of producing lithium carbonate at a price that's much lower than Australian or West African hard rock. And it also does so with a lot less land and freshwater impacts than, say, the evaporation ponds in Latin America. So we think it's a really compelling and new technology. So let's talk about risk. So it is a new technology, and in my last job before this one, I was in aerospace launching rockets to orbit, and in that business, the margins are so tight and the tolerances are so small that you basically get punished if you do not take risk. In mining, it's completely the opposite. When we go to a new customer, oftentimes, people are looking for 50 ways to say no before they say yes to a new technology, which can be discouraging, but when you spend time in this business, you start to get why. These mines take years to bring online. You need permits, you need a flow sheet, you need your subsurface characterization or modeling done. You need someone to buy your stuff, an off-taker. You need to get through regulators, and you need somebody to underwrite and pay for the whole thing. And at the end of that very long road, the worst thing is that you're underperforming on capacity or your variable costs are much higher than expected. That's not something you want in a public disclosure. So how do you handle that? There's two ways of doing that. The first are feasibility studies and this very well-trodden mining de-risking path. And the second is you can build it yourself. So on the feasibility side, which is where USTDA has been instrumental, it's about bridging the gap from concept to reality. So you go down this well-worn path of doing desktop studies, which cost tens of thousands of dollars, engineering laboratory studies, which cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, field pilots, which are millions of dollars, and on top of that, you can spend more money on subsurface permitting and so forth. So it's single-digit millions to low tens of millions to bring a project from an idea into reality in mining. And this is where USTDA has been instrumental in helping bridge that gap. This is not the most exciting, silver, object in the room. This kind of low amount of expense. It's not massive DFC or XM sums of money. But it is this unsung hero and underappreciated amount of capital that's really catalytic in bringing a lot of these projects to life. So that's one way you can de-risk the technology. The other is you build it yourself. There's a global pipeline of customers that I'm working with who are all interested in being the first, but they'd rather be the second or the third. And so one way of helping de-risk it for them is you actually build it yourself. So that's why we're building a project in the United States today, is we're going to be the first to develop the project at our technology to commercial scale, and therefore de-risk it for a global audience.
Okay, so if you're launching rockets in a prior life, you're used to managing risk or dealing with risk. Is Tom investing in one of your rocket line? No, I don't think he is today.
We don't manage risk in rockets.
You don't make rockets anymore.
All systems go.
So let's all launch some rockets, and then we'll learn what our risk tolerance is for real. But Tom, you're looking at this, and it is interesting, Matt, what you were talking about, and I know there's risk involved in everything also Yudis and Ian are doing. But when you look at this, what are you actually looking for in a project? What are the key factors that you're considering?
Sure. Thank you, Celeste, and thank you to all of the panelists. Let me say, I want to follow up with what Matt just said. I think something to think about USTDA is, as grant capital, we're incentivized to take risk. We can take commercial risk, technology risk, financial risk on the projects. For USTDA, our work is the earliest project development stage of a infrastructure project, whether that be energy, transportation, critical minerals, or digital infrastructure. For us, things that are really interesting to us, innovative technologies, something that's first of a kind. I work with Delta Offshore, looking at first private sector-led transmission line in Baklu, working on direct lithium extraction in Indonesia. There'll be a first of its kind in Indonesia. For USTDA, it's the earliest grant capital that's being put in to help move project developers and our partners in emerging markets up that value chain to get to the financial close. So as I said this morning, we're able to take a good idea and look at how do we close that gap for regulatory risk, legal risk, financial risk, and position projects that USTDA is supporting in a way that is teed up for the Export-Import Bank, the Development Finance Corporation. But as importantly, we look at multilaterals and commercial banks. We want to crowd in as much investment as we possibly can to infrastructure projects in emerging markets. I think, Celeste, we were just at the East-West Center 2 weeks ago that you led the Pacific Agenda. And we're talking about Southeast Asia, but I think it's the same side of the coin for Pacific Island countries. It's how do we take good ideas, good partners, and bring them together with U.S. industry to help move these infrastructure projects forward that will unlock capital. Because at the end of the day, what USTDA is doing is trying to unlock capital that will ultimately lead to the export of U.S. goods and services, but as importantly, particularly in the critical mineral space, looking at diversifying supply chains. And we're fortunate to be able to work with Lilac in Indonesia to look differently at how do we bring lithium into market in a way that hasn't been done yet, but really is going to put Indonesia as a first of its kind.
Yeah, no, thanks for mentioning that also. And Tom, in Hawaii, when we look at risk, the different partners that we have 3 of our Pacific Island leaders with us from Palau and FSM and RMI as well. And I think the whole idea of having these types of discussions where it is so clear that we're hearing from our U.S. leadership directly from those innovators what they need to make these things happen, from our government partners, what the USG could actually do collectively is really remarkable and I think actually unprecedented. And Ian, I'm going to go back to you because when we're talking about a lot of the disruption we're facing, what is the most important thing that you think Vietnam needs now to build that resilience? And how are partnerships going to play a key role in that?
Great. Let me just comment a little bit on Tom's comments, actually. I think in terms of USTDA, we actually had a grant under the previous administration to help us with the transmission line study, which was quite instrumental because at the time, our transmission line was stuck in the planning process in Vietnam. And so it was timely to get that transmission line study, firstly for the Vietnamese government to have a basis for planning in lieu of having their own plan. And secondly, it was great because at the time, it was meant to also not just evacuate power from our power plant, but it was also going to enable a lot of renewables nearby that were also trapped in having grid congestion, which is a problem in Vietnam. I believe grid resilience is probably a problem with a lot of countries now. And what I think the other part, obviously, was providing Vietnam the options to consider private sector capital to fund the transmission lines. Had a very good conversation with the chairman of the National Power Transmission Company, and that's something he's keen on, possibly working with USTDA and World Bank and others to help them figure out solutions for crowding in private sector capital specifically on that. And I think what's also helpful is the study that we did could also be replicated for the other grids that Vietnam needs to build. They just announced they want to implement 87 grid projects this year. Very ambitious. And they're going to need a lot of help because obviously funding that is, require a lot of support from financing that may not be available domestically. And so I think with American technology, American know-how in engineering, and American capital, or at least lead capital with allies and partners around the world, I think that could be quite useful to help Vietnam achieve what it wants at Trump speed. But more specifically, I think on your question of what needs to get done now, obviously, Vietnam is a developing country, so they're going from they've gone through their transition or trying to go through their transition, but at the very basis for them, base load energy is required. In order to get that, they need fuel for their gas-fired power plants. Right now, I think Vietnam's grid is about 30% installed capacity of generation, but for renewables, but it only generates about 8 to 9%. And Vietnam's power, as I said, is growing double digits. So you can get about 1 year's growth by increasing the grid by 30%. So I think that's not sustainable. I think they're going to need definitely more gas-fired mix. And in order to do that right now, Vietnam needs LNG and importing it because domestic gas fields that they have are right now basically depleting. So that source is no longer really there in terms of the scale that they need for the 20 gigs that I mentioned earlier. And I think the U.S. and its alliance and partner countries are ready to help and willing to collaborate on a G-to-G basis and multilateral basis to help Vietnam import billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars of LNG over the long term. We're talking decades. And on top of that, I think we've also had very good conversations with other counterparts within this room about purchasing LNG from the U.S., but it's shipped to Vietnam via companies from other allied and partner countries. And so I think that helps somewhat share the risk as well with other countries that have interest in Vietnam that are here today. There are also some financial instruments to help de-risk, obviously, certain issues from the U.S., and I think it's much more active. Good to see EXIM and DFC much more active than they have been in the past. That's been a huge issue. And also kind of working together with similar ECAs and development banks from other countries as well as multilaterals would be kind of key and instrumental for the amount of power and energy Vietnam needs. A more recent example, of obviously these financial innovations in de-risking is DFC providing political risk insurance for vessels going through the Strait of Hormuz. In the absence of private maritime insurance, I mean, this program is not obviously the same for Vietnam, but there are somewhat, different risks to overcome. I think for Vietnam, it's more like their credit rating issues, the foreign currency issues, and possibly even encroachment by aggressive activity by certain actors, related to certain islands and surrounding waters. And so I think that de-risking could be quite helpful that the U.S. can definitely help step in on. And so I think for us, what we're looking at is in a multi-pronged approach, working with all the different agencies to be able to deliver these deals at Trump speed. And we're all about that. And that's why I think for us, having a world-class LNG terminal like the Trump Terminal Vietnam is going to be key to get that energy into the country. But obviously on the back end, we need to work with our local community stakeholders to really understand how to not just buy the LNG, but to be able to buy it sustainably in the long term, because they need to feel comfortable knowing that they're not going to have any issues 5, 10, 20 years down the line, committing to hundreds of billions of dollars and not being able to afford to pay it. And I think the Vietnam is set up the U.S. is set up to help Vietnam with that through all of its different agencies. I mean, possibly even involving the Treasury here on a cross-currency or cross-currency interest rate swap that really on a central bank to central bank level could happen, which is more my background, having kind of started out at Citibank and FX. So I think a lot of that is going to really kind of drive the needle forward in order for making stuff happen.
So it's really having de-risking and having that sort of certainty, bringing in other types of capital, looking at LNG and that immediate need. And there's been a lot of really interesting discussions that's taken place even today around that. So really understanding how it's a multi-pronged strategy and there's de-risking needed across the board. And I mean, this is a good opportunity for me to turn back to Yudis as well. I think you talked a little bit already, Yudis, about some of the challenges, regulatory, financial, technical, in advancing progress. But for those other companies that would want to do business in Indonesia, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Celeste. Yes, as a state-owned enterprise, PT Dipa, we play as a role not only as a project developers, but also as a bridge or the connecting between the innovation, government priorities, and then also the private sectors and the international partnerships. In advancing the new technology in Indonesia, there are certainly many challenges. However, to keep it brief, I would highlight three aspects: regulatory alignment, financing, and technical implementations. From regulatory perspective, like what we will do right now for having the extraction minerals, we in the government of Indonesia, we not put the regulation about the extracting mineral for geothermal development for the powers. Now, because we still have the opportunity to also extracting the mineral while we are producing the energy, then we already work with the government since last 5 months, talking about the potential of the extracting this mineral as well. So hopefully, when these projects starting, when the projects are completed, then the regulation will be there also. So the innovation often develop faster than regulation when the introduction the new technology, especially those combining geothermal with the other applications, sometimes need to work closely with the several governments. That's what we did in the last 5 months actually. Institution to ensure that the activities fit within the existing frameworks. That said, we see strong the commitment from the Indonesian government to support this kind of innovations and also the energy transition, because if we're talking about the critical mineral, as the Tom said just now, the lithium is the important key component for having the battery industry actually. We in Indonesia, we just established the EV or the battery ecosystems. That's it. Even though that we still don't have any lithium yet in Indonesia, but
Soon.
now, right?
Soon.
Then now, because we having the project with the Lilac under the USTDA sponsors, that's probably it will be the answer for the government in Indonesia to fulfill the missing lithium on the battery industry. The second challenge is the financing. So geothermal projects are inherently high risk, particularly during the exploration stage actually. When new technology are introduced from investor might perceive an additional layer of uncertainty. This is why the partnership with the international institutions such as USCDA and the Japan institution international corporations are very important in helping the risking the project through the studies and early stage supports. Finally, in the technical side, as we got right now close relation with the Lilac in the geothermal things, the many geothermal resources in Indonesia are located in the remote area with the complex geological conditions. which means deploying new technology requires close collaboration between the local operator, global technology provider, and experienced engineering partners. In addition, business extensions such as mineral extraction from geothermal brine are still very new in Indonesia, I believe also in the global, as one of the first company exploring this in Indonesia. Now we work closely with the partners such like Matt from the Lilac and the other international technology provider also. For companies the interested in working in Indonesia, my advice is simple: build a strong local partnership. We as the state-owned enterprise is also willing to channeling you, the investor in Indonesia, to see to see and to find the fit local partners and align with the national priority and to take a long-term perspective. The opportunity in Indonesia and in energy transition are significant actually. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yudis. You know, I think it's great that you have Matt sitting next to you saying soon, you know, and I think these are some of the things that we're hearing. It's kind of the timeline and how quickly all of these things can actually happen. And I think, Matt, you know, with there's a growing reliance on extraction technology to solve this critical mineral shortage. My question to you is, what is actually more challenging for you? Is it proving that the technology works, or is it actually deploying it fast enough to actually make a material impact?
Yes.
And I want to know how soon. No, I'm just kidding.
It's the latter. The first few projects are going to be slow. Everybody says they want to be the first, but they really want to be the second or the third. And then as far as the speed of what new technology, how it can matter, it can be much quicker than the incumbent approaches today. So for example, today, if you want to produce lithium in Chile, you take the water out of the ground, the brine out of the ground, you let it sit in the sun for a few years, mixing in a brew of chemicals along the way. You lose half the lithium along the way, so your first production takes several years. With our technology, on paper, actually, and in practice, as soon as the brine's out of the ground, you have your first lithium carbonate in about an hour. So it should be a lot quicker. However, there's two problems with the new technologies like ours in the mining space. First, it's first of a kind. That's the dreaded moniker none of us like in the technology space. And second is that these are still projects. So on the first of a kind side, and we're going through this ourselves in Utah and the United States, all the stakeholders want to understand, does this actually work? So that's your regulators. They want to make sure you're not going to mess up their environment. There's your engineering firms who are wrapping the project. There's your off-takers who want to know, are you actually going to produce what you say you're going to produce? And then there's the financiers, the people funding the thing. They want to make sure they're going to get their money back, especially on the credit side. So that first of a kind is tough to get through, and that's really one of those gating items. There are ways around it, funding like USTDA, more deep-pocketed companies and other ways of doing it, or in our case, building our own, are ways to cut through that first of a kind, but it does take time. The second reason, though, that technologies are slow to deploy is that these are still projects. So the life cycle or the sales cycle of new technologies is limited by the ability for these projects to go into commercial production. In Utah, hopefully our project is online within 3.5 years, which is considered frighteningly fast in mining. A lot of other projects are going to take 5 to 10 years. And so if that's the natural cadence of these projects, and these new technologies are now just starting to be embedded in these commercial flow sheets, it takes that 5 or 10 years to get those first proof points into the market. So these new technologies like ours, and it's not just lithium, it's a lot of other metals as well, and it's not just our part of the flow sheet. There's so much exciting stuff going in mining right now. There's an influx of brain power. My friends from aerospace, from tech, from oil and gas are quitting their jobs and coming into the space because it's so interesting right now. However, it is still a relatively slow place to be, and that's because the natural pace of these projects is unfortunately so slow.
Yeah, no, that's, you know, it's turning these, you said earlier, these ideas into action. And can we do it quick enough for it to actually have an impact? And I do appreciate the partnership with Indonesia and the trust, I think, Yudis, that you have in looking at that, which is probably de-risked with partners like USTDA. And I think, Tom, my observation is sometimes communities, we think that we have a project, but really it's a problem, right? So how do you turn that problem on the map actually into a project and something that's bankable? So with USTDA, are you focused mostly on the project prep side, but do you also go into implementation?
Sure. Thank you. No, that's a great question. For USTDA, it's a fascinating little agency. Our statute is like 4 lines long, but it gives us the ability to do anything up until financing. So we don't finance, we look to others to finance. But what does that mean? We can get involved in the early stage feasibility study, which is kind of the longest pole of the tent. But then projects with Lilac, where you're actually piloting technology and testing technology, it really speeds up. You're much more closer to financial closure. For USTDA, we can go so far as hiring legal firms to negotiate power purchase agreements, offtake agreements. So we can do anything along the continuum up until financing, which is a unique place to be in an environment that's inherently risky. In infrastructure development, there's a lot that can go on. You have political risk, you have financial risk, you have currency risk. So for USTDA, as I said at the beginning, we're incentivized to take that risk. Congress gives us money every year to take that risk, to help our partners move their infrastructure forward in a way that is opening markets for American technology, American know-how, American innovation, and using kind of an all-of-the-above approach of early stage feasibility study all the way through to piloting technologies and taking risk on technologies. Matt was saying that it's still kind of first of the kind. We have a number of investments around the Indo-Pacific in small modular reactors. Just 2 weeks ago, we were in the Philippines, concluded an agreement with Morocco on kind of a vendor-neutral approach for small modular reactors. That's the role of USTDA, which is that early stage project preparation to seed the ground for new energy deployment. And I think one of the great opportunities we see is not only in nuclear side, but the gas side. During President Trump's first term, we launched a gas infrastructure initiative. We're launching that again next week with our partners here, LNG Allies, who's here with us today, to make those investments in LNG import terminals, regasification units, gas pipelines. Those infrastructure assets that are going to power economies across the Indo-Pacific. And those are the types of investments that we're being asked to make, not only by this administration, but by our Congress.
What you're talking about is really these are the critical conversations that are emerging as you're looking at these feasibility studies, not just within the USG apparatus and working with different colleagues. And, Matt, you said earlier, just having the regulators, the off-takers, the financiers all sort of being part of this discussion up front does actually reduce that risk. I guess something that came up in the green room conversation a little bit was how through those discussions, and then Ian, something that you mentioned earlier, about looking at LNG as the appropriate energy source for the community is the community engagement component of this, which actually will facilitate these projects to move more quickly. Maybe just quickly, Tom, on that, the approach that you've been taking and having those conversations, how that ultimately also de-risks the project.
Yeah, certainly where it makes sense, the scope of the work we do does include community engagement, includes environmental social impact assessments. Secretary Burgum talked about today about having to shorten it. That is part of what we have to do. We have to look at the environmental impacts. We have to look at the labor impacts. And when we look at the environmental impacts, that requires us to engage with the local community, particularly in the energy space. We were talking earlier with Ian, you have to be engaged with the local community to have these transformational programs. It's not enough just say we're going to put a new gas-fired power plant. You have to help them understand why it is that this is in their interest and get that buy-in from the local community. And those on the ground are much closer to it than I, but it's fundamental to the investments we make is to make sure that we're engaging the local communities looking at both the labor and environmental components of any investment we make.
Yeah, and I'd invite any one of our panelists to comment.
Yeah,
on
absolutely. I mean, from early on, we recognized definitely that need. I mean, we commissioned our environmental, social, health impact assessment very early on. And so obviously kind of following the IFC Equator principles, all the requirements there, so we charged a company called ERM, which is probably one of the best companies to do it. So we've already started preparing that ahead of the local EIA requirements to make sure we could also balance the international requirements from obviously finance and the lenders that were going to acquire it. And so I think the good thing is, at least financial community is providing a lot of those guardrails as well to ensure it. And we just made sure that from the very beginning that everything that we from designing stage in the engineering, when we commissioned our pre-feed and feed studies for the whole entire plant, whether it be the power plant or the pipeline or the LNG terminal, that ERM was included in assessing that early on. And then one thing that, again, at the local level is really assessing our kind of social engagement program, especially when it came to land matters, because that's a very sensitive issue in Vietnam. The land is owned by the people, but managed by the state. And so how to engage with that and the gaps between that and, say, international kind of standards for really kind of land compensation and things like that. And I'm pretty sure Indonesia has similar problems as well.
Yudis, do you want to comment on that as well? I mean, some of the geothermal work that you've done in the past, you've really successfully looked at that to reduce the risk. We hate when projects blow up at the last minute, but it sounds like you've been very successful in looking at that as well.
Yeah. Taking the recent geothermals, actually, mostly we got that in the resource risk actually, but right now the technology on how to mitigating the risk on the exploration in the geothermals, and then also how the converting the energy is now is quite rapidly changed. It developed from time to time, like they are catching up the requirement or the energy that we require right now. In Indonesia, we're talking about how we could have the energy sustainable, energy reliable, because we try to figure out how we put our renewable energy as a basis of our the energy in Indonesia as the key play role for the next 30 years, because we already said that 2060 it will be net zero emission in Indonesia. So we really depending on the renewable energy in next phase. So talking about in the geothermal, by having business on the mineral extractions, that can be giving the more attractiveness in the geothermal development actually, other than only for energy, for the electricity, but now we also open for having the minerals like the critical mineral right now, or even right now we also doing the mineral that taking out together with the brine, we also processing into the fertilizer right now. So then we could talking about the food sustainability, and then also the energy security, and then attractiveness can be leveraging by having numbers of technology right now. As one of that one is the mineral extraction can be the commodity, not in Indonesia electricity is a PSO actually, right? But the minerals can be the commodity. Then if we could combine all those things, and then it will make the geothermal more interesting right now.
Yeah, actually, and with the huge priority that Indonesia is putting on food security as well, seeing that more holistically in an ecosystem approach actually to get further support is actually a great approach. I don't know, Matt, if you had any quick thoughts on the way you've been approaching that.
Sure. So from a technology perspective, we started in Latin America, in the Puna, in Chile and Argentina, in the highlands, and very quickly you learn that water scarcity is one of the most important facets of living up there. And it's some of the most remote and beautiful landscapes on Earth, but there's not a lot of water. And so early on, it actually became a cost input or a design input for our technology. So in a near commodity like lithium, the top 3 priorities are always cost, cost, cost. But after that, fresh water becomes one of the most important things that we're seeing globally. We see that in Germany, we see that in Hungary, we see that in Chile and Argentina. And for the project we're building in Utah in the United States, we're in a very water-stressed environment where water is one of the most contentious political issues. So even in Utah, the state of Utah where we're working, which is a very mining and extractive-friendly state, fresh water is a real concern. The other concern is the Great Salt Lake in Utah. It's ringed by industrial sites that have caused a lot of environmental damage over time. So early on, it was a non-starter for us to even get going on this project. Community engagement was clearly needed from day one. We have spent time in gas stations working with locals. We've spent time with the local art installation folks. We've spent time with all of the local newspapers just to really educate and bring the community along. Otherwise, you're never going to advance the project.
That's great. Okay, we have about 5 minutes. I do want to allow you all just to tell us what's next. And Matt, why don't we just start with you and go back this direction?
Sure. So within Indo-Pacific, we're really excited to be here. I think I'm most excited by the innovation of companies here. We are working with companies all over the world, and even established mining companies aren't as open to taking what is seen as technical risk, and don't worry, it's not that risky, with mining. So it's been really exciting to see that. And it makes sense because if you take off Australia, which is kind of like a floating mine, the rest of the region doesn't have large sets of hard rock or lithium reserves that people know about today. So really technology is the answer for this region to grow. So we're really excited to be working with Dipa. There's other groups along in the region we're excited to work with as well. We're excited about geothermal opportunities. We're also excited about aqueous recycling streams. With lithium prices going like this again, we're seeing a lot of uptick in activity in recycling, and although it's not going to be a major part of primary production today, we see that secondary market in the future in the early 2030s starting to take shape. So we're excited to pursue both of those things.
Thanks so much, Matt. And Yudis, Lilac's next for you, but please tell us for Energi in the Indo-Pacific for you.
Yeah, it is really interesting to side by side with the Lilac as a lithium technology providers, especially under supporting the USTDA. That it probably give the new horizon on how the geothermal can be also put it together with the mining or the mineral extraction and so on. So then probably as a Matt say just now, like how the lithium mining in based on the rock mining that can be changed, because if we're talking about the environments, that probably this one is more environment friendly, how to get the lithium in order to having the energy storage for us. Then it will be interesting for Dipa, especially in Indonesia, and also all the geothermal industry in the world. That's for me. Thank you.
Super exciting with the innovation that's emerging in this space. Nguyen, what about you?
Yeah, in order to unleash clean, affordable, and reliable energy for Vietnam from the U.S. as well as allied partnering countries around the world, stakeholder alignment is key. I think our project is a concrete, really, demonstration of how American-led energy solutions with Vietnamese ambition, private sector initiative, and can kind of work together to secure energy supply chains that matter. I think we want to start now with the Trump Terminal Vietnam to address the immediate energy security for the country, given a lot of gas-fired power plants are coming online, but gas is still a key critical issue. We're naming the terminal, obviously after Trump, on the basis that we see kind of all of his transformational accomplishments. We believe under his leadership, especially starting from Trump 1.0 to now, the United States has now become the undisputed leader in unleashing energy from the US and being now the global leader in LNG. And so now they can power allies and partner countries all around the world. I think for us, really the way it's kind of say it is, this is the way for Trump to help and America to help basically make their success in energy and LNG of abundance, as we've been hearing at this forum today, Vietnam's energy security for itself. Every cubic meter of US LNG that flows into the terminal, it kind of does three things at once. One, it basically strengthens Vietnam's energy security, but two, it obviously helps balance trade. Vietnam has a $133 billion trade surplus with the US to help underwrite kind of this long-term obligation of LNG. And third, obviously, it's going to help directly provide a demonstration from Vietnam on addressing the tariffs. So I think together that all really kind of helps put together a solution that is comprehensive and long-term that kind of really fits in with that comprehensive strategic partnership between both nations.
Yeah, I appreciate what you've been consistently saying, Ian. It's about long-term vision that's really needed to be driving these shorter-term opportunities, flooding in capital. As I turn to you, Tom, for the final word, I think there's one thing that you probably haven't been doing is getting sleep, because we saw you in Honolulu looking at these deals. It's how are we actually making these priorities clear, and really what are those pathways for collaboration? You're connecting this across the entire Indo-Pacific region, and I think we all appreciate that. But what is next for you, for USTDA, for this room, for this panel?
Great. Thank you, Celeste, and thank you for your leadership at the East-West Center and what you're doing to bring us together, particularly on the Pacific Island region. I think first, what's next, unless something goes drastically wrong in the next 20 hours, we'll be signing the agreement to co-finance the direct lithium extraction project tomorrow afternoon. So that's the first. The other two areas, USTDA is committed to what we call 3 reverse trade missions. We'll be bringing delegations from across Southeast Asia to the United States, focused on small modular reactors, microreactors, to introduce kind of the leaders from across the region to U.S. technology, U.S. innovation. I think you saw some of it this morning with Energi, but there's a broad cross-section of nuclear energy development taking place in the United States. And lastly, what I talked about just a moment ago, which is the launch of the gas initiative. I think that will be driving a lot of our investment in the coming years, is making sure our partners have the infrastructure to be able to take the gas to power their economies, whether it's import terminals, regas units, anything that is going to be helpful to our partners to meet the energy demand for their economies. And that's the quick synopsis, but there's a much longer term approach, which is we're all in on the Indo-Pacific and the Pacific region generally.
Yeah, I think we're all so deeply grateful to you, Tom, for USTDA and our whole interagency ecosystem. I think we heard a deal announced here, and I think we should all be celebrating that. So please join me in thanking everybody for that deal. I should say congratulating you for the deal. And again, please join me in thanking the panelists again for their tremendous contribution to this. So that concludes this panel, and we're a few minutes closer to cocktails. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much to Ms. Connors, Mr. Hardy, Mr. Nguyen, Mr. Yudistian, and Mr. Ganser for insightful conversations. Thank you very much. Let's send them a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Please step down for the podium.